Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show, talking today about Gable and returns and 4 things you need to do to improve it and to start building beautiful. Come join me today on Build Show. Gable end returns. What am I talking about? I'm talking about when you have the gable end of a house and let's say it does this, right? These return, okay? And they come around this side and then you've got these other details. It's really pretty. And right, you've got the gable end returns. Well, historically, this was something that was magical. That was something that was architectural, something that was really pretty. Today, it's become kind of the lost art of building, right? It's become one of those things that we're just not doing right. So I wanted to spend some time talking about it. Now, 2 things are happening when you're building these. You're either doing a pork chop end, okay? Or you are, for some reason, roofing these things and they end up looking terrible. So the first one is this pork chop end, okay? So well, let me show you the way it's supposed to look, okay? So if I zoom in on this and you're coming down and you've got a raking molding and then you've got your fascia over here, right? This is your fascia over here. And so this gable end turns around. Now the house, let's just say it's this far. What ends up happening is you got a corner board that comes down here, and then you've got a molding that goes there, and then it goes there, and it goes around right around the front, right? So this is the gable end return. Now, the historic way of doing it was to establish proportional relationship between all these different parts and pieces. Remember these things I built up that were basically showing the classical orders. Remember, we've got this relationship of the column and the entablature, right? So architrave, frieze, and cornice. The same relationship you have here in that here's your cornice, and then you've got what needs to be a frieze, and then, you know, typically an architrave isn't always in this part, but you are essentially building up a mini entablature around the top. You can see this especially strong in the Greek Revival era. The Greek Revival houses, like the Wade House, really has a strong, you know, entablature that wraps around the building. Remember, it's a temple front kind of design, and the corners of the house are actually these strong pilasters and columns. So remember, that's our basis, right? That's where all this design comes from. And so there is a proportional relationship here, and it is not first and foremost a area you need to shed water from, okay? And I'll come back to that. So basically, if you have all these different parts and pieces, and let's say you have a frieze that's included in here before you get to the corner board, you end up having your cimations up here. There's no molding on this one. And then your frieze is down here, right? So you have all these parts and pieces. Now, what's happened is what's being called a pork chop end. And basically, instead of having this piece come down and then tie into this piece, they just have one piece that comes down and they just kind of elbows over. They call it a pork chop because it looks like a little pork chop. This trim comes down, covers this basis, and then just covers that whole section. It's called a pork chop end. It's ugly, okay? Stop doing that. Stop cheaping out, right? If you're gonna create an architectural element, if you're gonna create something beautiful, these pork chop ends, we wanna stop doing that. So the first one is this pork chop end, and that is basically being lazy, cheap, and not wanting to spend money, not maybe having the skill of your craftsman, being able to do the return. Stop, okay? The second thing that happens is, let's say it's coming down like this, and it hits a fascia that comes across. If it's done, you know, better, okay, what guys are ended up doing is they end up roofing this section in here, and they put maybe 1 or 2 sections of roof in here, and they create this big shed, okay? Stop doing that too, right? There's no reason why we have to put roofing in here in order to stop water from sitting here, okay? Because that's really all you're doing. Instead of, historically, if we looked at this thing from this direction, let's say this is the house, and then your things coming across, and then your roof's going up, right? And so this is that return looking back this way. We're trying to stop water from sitting here. And what guys are doing is they're putting a big angle in here and roofing this area here, okay? And you can see from the pictures and slides, and I mean, this picture is the worst, right? You really don't even have time or the ability to do 1 or 2 courses of shingles up here. And so look at the flashing, look at all the stuff that's happening there just in order to shed water away from there. If instead we just took a piece of sheet metal and just did that, we solved the whole thing. You get rid of all these flashing elements, right? See this flashing one, that flashing, this flashing, one, two, you get rid of all that. It cleans it all up, right? And so you don't have to have that in order to have something that holds water. So again, we've got two problems, the pork chop end and then this crazy roofing detail that we're trying to put over our gable end returns. And so if we, again, look at it historically, get rid of what we don't want to do, right? We're going to throw that away. But we look at the Wade house, okay? And this is that historic house that we looked at in the Greek Revival era. You'll notice that there is a proportional relationship between this column that runs down the face here. This entablature is running across this whole face over here. And then you've got the gable end returning around. And so if you look at a column detail, right, if I was going to draw up a column, right, if I had my pilaster, and then I had a capital, and then I had what, an architrave, right, and then I had a frieze, right, and then I had a cornice, bed mold, corona, cimation, okay, and then what happens is, let's just say this is our molding, there's our return, there it goes back. And now this runs down the building, right? Right, that's running off this way. And there's your roof up here, and this is your gable end return. So all I'm doing is I'm taking that classical system, that cornice, right? And I'm building it on the corner here. I'm building it so that it returns. And notice the same reveal I have over here is over here. Right? And so there's a proportional relationship between all these parts and pieces. You know, some of these houses, it's difficult because there are houses where this house that looks like this, okay? Let's say the door's here, and you've got these windows that fit right up under the eave, okay? Well, there's no room for any kind of frieze or anything that comes in here. So sometimes houses are designed so poorly that we can't even do this classical detail because we're hampered by all of this. So in this example here, right, there's no room for kind of these parts and pieces, the cimation and the fascia and all these different pieces that help build it down, that give it this proportional scale. These windows are stuck up right underneath that roof eave. So if you're into the designing of a house, what you're going to do is you're going to say, I want my windows down from that eave 12 inches, 16 inches, some amount, so that when we come around these corners and our gable ends going up like this, I have enough moldings and details so it doesn't look silly here, right? This house here, this same house, look how skinny their little gable end returns are. I would have had these windows pulled down, and instead of having a brick soldier course across there, that would have been wood. And that would have helped this whole cornice return look right and look better. You don't want to have a gutter that, remember I talked about my gutter video about why is there a molding on my gutter? This type of gutter system is not what you want in a situation like this, okay? Remember I said in those gutters that the reason there's a molding there on your gutter is because it's the cimation at the top of your entablature, okay? What's better here is a round gutter, okay, so that you don't have that big flat spot and that weird molding sitting out there. So what's ideal is that if this is our molding, our cimation that runs around, let's say it runs around, and then this is your corona, underneath that you've got a bed mold, right, that runs around, and then you've got your fascia. There's a proportional relationship between these in that you don't want your fascia smaller than your corona as it runs across here. So make sure that this doesn't get too small and make this look clunky and big. Because what you want to see is you want that this lower part looks like it can support that upper part. And getting kind of the proportions of those moldings right is really the key. There's about 4 rules here that you want to practice when we're thinking about these gable end returns. One is, this is not something that you're going to pork chop end it, right? You're not just going to run a piece of molding down, put a big square up there and hide that gable end, okay? Deal with it architecturally so you don't have to do that, okay? 2, we're not going to roof this area, okay? No more. Realize that 95% of guys are doing it wrong. And if you start doing it right, if you start showing kind of your expertise here, you can really kind of raise above the rest. So we're not going to roof these anymore. 3, there's going to be a proportional relationship that we're going to have and work on here so that it doesn't get clunky and it doesn't get weird. And remember, you're working on that classical system of scale and proportion in your entablature as it supports your roof. And so there's an architectural element here that your corner board or your pilaster is supporting. So visually it needs to be beautiful. And then finally, don't put that kind of gutter on. This kind of gutter makes much more sense, much more visually beautiful. If you can practice those 4 things, guys, you really will start to set yourself apart. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Hull Millwork, Hull Homes. Sign up for the newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.